Hi, I'm Johnny Temple from Akashic Books. Greetings from my coronavirus quarantine in Brooklyn, and I'm delighted today to be speaking with Pulitzer Prize winning author Jennifer Egan, also quarantined in Brooklyn. Greetings.
Hi.
I want to start by asking you, how is your health? I know you actually were suffering under the virus.
Well, presumed. I mean, like so many people who didn't go to the hospital, I never have been tested. I'm totally fine. I'm lucky. It was, kind of a lingering illness, but I never had trouble breathing. So it was really, not fun, but a kind of tiny echo of the miseries other people are going through. And I actually now it's just been a month, and I feel as if it didn't happen. So it took a while, but I feel pretty lucky. I would love to know that I really did have it, because, it would be great to know if I have the antibodies and immunity. It would be great to give plasma, but of course, testing is where we just cannot seem to pull it together on any level. So I don't know. Hopefully I'll someday know.
Right, right. And where are you sitting right now? Is this your home office?
This is my home office. So it's interesting, since I work at home, in some ways, I feel like my life has been less disrupted than so many people's, because I really am home a lot. And this is where I would be, on any day, usually.
I've just had the pleasure of reading your novel, The Keep, which was published in 2006. And it was a unusual and in a way uncanny time to be reading the book, given the juxtaposition between physical isolation and digital technology that the book explores. When did you first start using email on a regular basis?
I remember specifically because it was, I really started using email regularly because I had to, because I was writing about gays in the military under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So this was like a sort of hidden network of gay personnel in the Marines specifically who communicated, for whom, remote technology was sort of a godsend and allowed them to kind of have communication with each other secretly. And so I used email to talk to them, and that was in like 1990, late 1996, early 1997.
And you would have been writing The Keep in 2004, 2005, maybe?
Yeah. So it's interesting to think about it compared to now. The big technological difference between the time during which I was writing The Keep and now is that the iPhone had not come out. So I was kind of writing about a guy who is, who requires almost constitutionally the sense of constant connection, which now would describe, virtually all of us. But at that point, it was anomalous. And so he almost seems a little freakish in that context. And then the fun of writing that book was to create a Gothic world around him, and sort of the Gothic is a fascinating genre, a very old one. So it was very fun to place this hyper-connected guy who was unusual in that time in a Gothic environment, literally an old castle, in which he tried to remain connected. He brings a satellite dish with him, but in the end, he's completely severed from communication with the outside world. But what I ended up realizing in working on The Keep is that more and more, and again, this was published in 2006, more and more we all live in an atmosphere saturated with the possibility of disembodied communication. That's what we do. We await messaging from outside. And in a certain sense, that is a very Gothic landscape. So that was the surprising revelation that came to me as I was working on this book. It's funny to think of it in our modern context, because this is so much more true now than it was. I mean, when I wrote that book, I was pecking out texts on a flip phone. What does it mean to call something real, exactly? And I mean, that question has taken on such scary hues more recently as we deal with fraudulent news, with the inability to actually settle on facts, with the idea that people of differing political persuasions actually don't agree on each other's facts. So the question of what is real and what isn't, and how we can agree on some kind of reality seems ever more pressing than I could have realized when I was working on that book.
In the squalor of today, right now, while we're all physically isolated, but technologically dialed in, how is your own imagination doing?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't find that my imagination, knock every piece of wood near me, it does not seem to have been stymied by online experience. I would say, on the contrary, while as a citizen, I guess, if you will, I kind of deplore constant technology. I loathe all screens. I'm terrified that it's destroying our culture. But as a fiction writer, I'm kind of fascinated by the way they work upon us and the ways in which they impact our inner lives. And that, in a certain way, that has been my subject from the very start of my career. Obviously, there was no internet when I was writing my first book in the early 90s, but I was just interested in mass media and how that in and of itself had impacted interior life, and specifically the ways in which the growing emphasis on self-presentation, if you will, sort of marketing of oneself, changes who we are to ourselves, if it does. Sort of what that relationship is. And it's impossible to exhaust the topic because the technology keeps changing in ways that raise the question anew.
While reading The Keep, two novels came to mind. More than two came to mind, but I thought I would ask you about two that occurred to me. One of which is Jane Eyre. The Baroness reminded me a little bit of the woman in the attic.
Mm-hmm.
And also The Shining, this sort of hotel castle, physically isolated. The Shining is also a bit of a horror story about the life of a writer. Have you read either of those books?
Oh yeah, it's interesting. Stephen King is a great contemporary Gothicist, and he uses many of the tropes. And certainly, The Shining has the one that I already mentioned, which is, people removed from normal life who begin to experience things that they can't decide, can't distinguish in terms of whether they're real or imagined. The book that really sort of landed for me in my thinking about The Keep was Salem's Lot, which is actually a pretty early Stephen King, which has many of those tropes. It's quite scary. Jane Eyre, for sure. That's just smack in the middle of the Gothic tradition. I've read it many times.
Jennifer, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today, and I wish you and your family the best of luck in the days ahead.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, Johnny.